Some of the smartest, wealthiest money in America is quietly pouring into the least glamorous real estate on earth. Not skyscrapers, not beachfront condos, not gleaming office towers. Trailer parks, the humble mobile home community, the kind you have driven past on the edge of town and never once thought about, has quietly become one of the most sought-after assets on Wall Street. Blackstone wants in. Billion-dollar public companies are buying them by the thousands. And for long stretches, this humble corner of real estate delivered some of the most durable returns in the business. Once you understand why, you will see one of the most perfect business models in the entire country. And you will also see one of the most controversial. Because here is the tension that runs through this whole story, the thing to hold on to for the next 15 minutes. The exact same features that make a mobile home park a dream investment are the features that can make it a nightmare to live in. This is a business built on a quiet kind of power, and today we are going to look at both sides of it, honestly. How the money works, who is buying, and what it means for the millions of people who call these places home. Let me show you what that tension looks like on the ground. In 2019, residents of several mobile home parks in Iowa opened their mailboxes to find letters announcing that the rent on the land beneath homes they already owned was about to jump by as much as 70%, all at once. To understand how that is even possible, and why some of the biggest investors in the country are betting it will keep happening, you first have to understand the strange economics of the mobile home park. Start with the scale, because it is far bigger than almost anyone realizes. There are somewhere in the range of 40 to 50,000 mobile home parks across the United States, holding roughly 4 million home sites. And by most estimates, around 20 million Americans live in manufactured housing. This is not a fringe corner of the market. Mobile home parks are, quietly, the single largest source of unsubsidized affordable housing in the country. Much of it exists without the deep operating subsidies that traditional affordable housing programs require. It is, for millions, simply the cheapest path to a roof of your own that America has left. And that fact, that these communities are essential and irreplaceable, is exactly what makes them so valuable and so contested. Now, to understand the investment, you have to understand one strange feature that makes this asset unlike almost any other. In a mobile home park, the residents usually own their homes, but they do not own the land underneath them. They rent that. The park owner owns the dirt, the roads, the water lines, and the utility hookups, and charges each resident a monthly lot rent for the space their home sits on. Many residents own the home itself, sometimes free and clear, while still paying rent on the ground it stands on. So you have a piece of land generating steady monthly rent from people who own their own homes and have every reason to stay. Hold that picture, because everything about why this business works flows from it. And there is a quiet cruelty tucked inside that arrangement. Because a mobile home usually cannot be financed with a normal mortgage, most buyers use what is called a chattel loan, a personal property loan more like a car loan, often at noticeably higher interest rates. And crucially, without owning the land, the home tends to build far less wealth than a conventional house. And in many markets, it can actually lose value as it ages, behaving more like a vehicle than a piece of real estate. So the resident is often paying to own a stagnant or depreciating asset, while the land beneath it, the part they can never own, only becomes more valuable. The wealth flows in one direction, and it is not toward the homeowner. So let's talk about why investors have started calling this a near-perfect business model. There are 4 pillars, and they stack on top of each other. The first, and the most important, is the captive tenant. A mobile home is, despite the name, not really mobile. Moving one is a massive undertaking, and it can cost $5,000 or more to detach a home, transport it, and set it up somewhere else, if you can even find another park with an open lot. Which means that when the rent goes up, the resident faces a brutal math problem. Move at enormous cost and risk, or stay and pay. Almost everyone stays. Large, professionally managed portfolios routinely report occupancy up in the high 90s, with actual home move-outs so rare that most other landlords can only dream of it. The tenant is, in the coldest business terms, captive. The second pillar is a supply moat that is almost unheard of anywhere else in real estate. New mobile home parks are extraordinarily hard to build. Between restrictive zoning, high land costs, and fierce local opposition, new communities are rarely approved. And nationwide, the supply grows at only a tiny fraction of the pace of other housing. Meanwhile, existing parks are actually disappearing, sold off and redeveloped into apartments or shopping centers. In California alone, thousands of lots have vanished over the past 2 decades. So you have a fixed, shrinking supply of an essential product with rising demand. Investors like to describe it as one of the only kinds of housing where meaningful new supply has nearly stopped. The third pillar is that this business is remarkably recession-resistant. When the economy turns down and money gets tight, demand for the cheapest housing in the country does not fall. It rises. During the turmoil of 2020, mobile home parks were one of the only commercial real estate sectors, alongside industrial warehouses, to actually see occupancy and rents go up while almost everything else was falling. Hard times are, perversely, good for the affordable housing business. And the fourth pillar is the lean economics. Because the residents own their homes, the park owner does not have to maintain them. No leaky roofs to fix, no appliances to replace, no interiors to renovate between tenants. The owner just maintains the land, the roads, and the utility lines. That keeps operating expenses unusually low, often somewhere in the mid-30s to mid-40s% of income, typically leaner than a comparable apartment building. And for years, it helped make manufactured housing communities one of the steadier performers in all of real estate. Stack those 4 pillars together: captive tenants, frozen supply, recession resistance, and lean costs, and you can see why the smart money came running. So who exactly is buying? For most of its history, this was a mom-and-pop business. Tens of thousands of parks, each owned by a local family who knew their residents by name. That is exactly the kind of fragmented, sleepy industry that consolidators love, because it is full of undervalued, mismanaged assets waiting to be professionalized. And so, over the last decade, a wave of institutional money rolled in. The largest player today is a public company called Sun Communities, which owns hundreds of manufactured home communities, and, by its own reporting, on the order of 100,000 home sites. Another giant, Equity Lifestyle Properties, sits right alongside it. For long stretches, these companies rewarded shareholders handsomely, compounding steadily year after year, though their more recent performance has been far bumpier, a reminder that even a great underlying business is not a guaranteed stock. Even Blackstone, one of the largest private equity firms on the planet, has moved into the space. Estimates of exactly how much of the market has gone corporate vary widely, in part because so much ownership hides inside anonymous holding companies. But there is little dispute about the direction. Institutional ownership has risen sharply from where it stood a generation ago, and it is still climbing. And here is a detail that tells you everything about how they think. When these buyers acquire a park, they have paid prices that work out to tens of thousands of dollars per lot, sums that look far too high against the rent being collected today. Why overpay? Because they are not buying today's rent. They are buying the decades of rent increases they believe are locked in by those 4 pillars. When you own the only kind of real estate nobody can build more of, filled with tenants who cannot leave, you are not really pricing the present. You are pricing a future where the rent almost inevitably goes up. Which brings us to the other side of the story, because everything I just described, all 4 of those beautiful pillars, looks very different when you are not the one collecting the rent. Go back to the first pillar, the captive tenant. From an investor's spreadsheet, that is pricing power, the ability to raise rents with almost no risk of losing customers. From a resident's front porch, it is a trap. When a new owner takes over and raises the lot rent, the resident cannot simply shop around, because moving the home is prohibitively expensive and there is nowhere to move it to. And so, in a number of well-documented cases, that power has been used aggressively. Remember those Iowa letters from the start of the video? The firm behind them was Haven Park Capital, which in 2019 acquired several Iowa communities and announced lot rent increases ranging from roughly 24% to as much as 69%. To be fair, Haven Park has said it later softened some of those increases and pointed to money it invested back into the communities. And that tension is genuine, but the underlying mechanism is not in dispute. That is the captive tenant model, working exactly as designed, just pointed at the people who live there. And who are those people? Very often, they are exactly the ones least able to absorb a shock. Retirees on fixed incomes, working families, people who put their life savings into a manufactured home precisely because it was the affordable option, only to discover that they own a home that often builds little wealth, sitting on land they do not control. For someone in that position, a $100 increase in monthly lot rent is not a minor annoyance. It can be the thing that forces them to sell the home, often at a loss, because the home barely moves and the buyer pool is tiny. You can see the squeeze in the numbers themselves. Estimates of average lot rent range widely, from around $300 a month in many older mom-and-pop parks to $600 or $700 and climbing in corporate-owned communities. That gap is, in many cases, the sound of a business being optimized. And housing advocates warn that as this optimization spreads, it quietly erodes the largest pool of affordable housing the country has left. But here is where an honest look demands some nuance, because the villain and victim version of this story is too simple. The deepest cause of the problem is not simply greedy buyers. It is a genuine, nationwide shortage of affordable housing, made worse by the very zoning rules that block anyone from building new parks. That shortage is what hands owners their pricing power in the first place. And not every corporate owner is the same. Many buy parks that were genuinely neglected, mismanaged, and falling apart under absentee mom-and-pop owners, and pour real money into new roads, utilities, and amenities. Some of the largest operators run communities that look less like the stereotype and more like tidy resorts. Manufactured housing remains, even now, one of the last realistic paths to owning your own home in America. And residents are not powerless. Across the country, more than 1,000 parks have been bought by their own residents and turned into resident-owned cooperatives, locking in affordable rents for good, often with the help of nonprofits that specialize in financing these buyouts. And a growing number of states have started passing laws giving residents the first chance to purchase their park before it can be sold to an outside investor. The fight over who owns this dirt, in other words, is far from settled. So what is the real lesson hiding inside the mobile home park? It is one of the cleanest case studies you will ever find in a single, uncomfortable truth about business. The exact same features that make an asset a perfect investment, captured demand, a supply nobody can expand, and a product people cannot live without, are the same features that hand its owner enormous power over people who cannot easily walk away. Efficiency and vulnerability turn out to be two sides of the same coin. A mobile home park is, at once, a genuinely brilliant business, a vital piece of the affordable housing system, and a place where the people with the least leverage can feel the squeeze the most. Whether you see a dream investment or a social problem depends almost entirely on where you happen to be standing. And that is the strange power of looking closely at an ordinary thing. The trailer park on the edge of town is not simple at all. It is a near-perfect machine, a lifeline, and a pressure point, all sitting quietly on the same patch of rented dirt. If this changed how you see those communities you have driven past 100 times, that is exactly what this channel is for. We take the ordinary things hiding in plain sight and show you the strange, powerful economics running underneath them. Subscribe, and next time we will break down another business you have never once thought of as a business, because the most interesting empires are almost always the ones hiding in plain sight.